tropical turquoise water in the frozen north. Sand that sings when you touch it. An underground salt city beneath a major metropolis. Ghost lights that defy physics. Moving sand dunes that eat forests whole. Rocks that glow in the dark. A state created by political accident. Ancient coral from a vanished ocean. Perfectly preserved shipwrecks from the 1800s. An island where wolves and moose fight an eternal war. All of this exists in one place, and that place is Michigan. Not Hawaii, not Iceland, not New Zealand. Michigan. The same state everyone dismisses as the Rust Belt. The flyover zone. The place people only know for cars in cold weather. But here's what nobody tells you. Michigan is one of the most geographically insane places in North America. It sits on secrets that belong in fantasy novels. Not the American Midwest. And over the next few minutes, I'm going to prove it to you with 35 facts. So wild, so unexpected, so absolutely mind-blowing, that you'll never look at the Great Lakes region the same way again. Fair warning. This journey goes deep. When most people think of Michigan, they picture factory smoke billowing over Detroit's skyline, snowdrifts burying cars in January, and maybe a Rust Belt town that's seen better days. The Mitten State. The land of automobiles and frigid winters. A flyover zone on the way to somewhere more interesting. But what if I told you that every single assumption you just made is hiding a geographical secret so wild, so unexpected, that it will make you question whether you're even talking about the same state? Because here's the truth that nobody talks about. Michigan is one of the most geographically bizarre places in North America. It's a state that shouldn't exist in its current form. A place where political accidents created borders that make zero sense, and where nature decided to go absolutely wild with experiments that belong in fantasy novels. Not the American Midwest. I'm talking about lakes with water so turquoise they look photoshopped. Stones made of fossilized coral from an ocean that existed before dinosaurs walked the earth. Islands that serve as nature's private laboratory, where predator and prey are locked in an eternal dance with no escape. And sand. Yes, sand, that literally sings when you walk on it. So forget everything you think you know about Michigan. Over the next few minutes, we're going on a journey through 35 facts that will transform this so-called boring Midwest state into one of the most fascinating places you never knew existed. And trust me, by the end of this video you'll be looking at maps of the Great Lakes region with completely different eyes. Let's start with the biggest geographical plot twist in American history. The accidental empire, the Upper Peninsula that was never supposed to exist. Michigan's very shape is the result of one of the most ridiculous conflicts in American history. In the 1830s, Michigan and Ohio went to war. Yes, an actual war. It was called the Toledo War, and it was fought over a tiny strip of land near the city of Toledo. Now I know what you're thinking. A war over Toledo seems a bit extreme, but at the time the strip contained access to the Great Lakes and represented serious economic power. And it was fought over a tiny strip of land near the city of Toledo. Now I know what you're thinking. A war over Toledo seems a bit extreme. But at the time, this strip contained access to the Great Lakes and represented serious economic power. Michigan lost. As a consolation prize, the federal government forced Michigan to accept this massive chunk of wilderness to the north, the Upper Peninsula. At the time, everyone thought it was worthless. It was disconnected from the rest of the state, heavily forested, brutal in winter, and seemingly had nothing of value. Michigan politicians were furious. They called it a punishment, a geographical joke. But here's where the plot twist comes in. That worthless land turned out to hold approximately 90% of the nation's copper reserves at the time. It contained iron ore that would fuel the Industrial Revolution. It became home to some of the most pristine wilderness in the entire country. Today, the Upper Peninsula is arguably the most geographically stunning part of the entire state, with waterfalls, cliff faces, and forests that make the lower part look tame by comparison. The UP, as locals call it, is so distinct from the rest of Michigan that people who live there sometimes call themselves Yoopers and refer to people from the Lower Peninsula as trolls, because they live below the bridge. It's essentially a separate state in culture, geography, and spirit, all because of a political mistake from nearly 200 years ago. And speaking of things that don't look like they belong in Michigan, 34. The Caribbean of the North. Torch Lake's impossible waters. The first time I saw a photo of Torch Lake, I was absolutely convinced someone had photoshopped Caribbean water into a Michigan landscape. The water is that color, that stunning crystalline tropical turquoise that you associate with Cancun or the Havims. Not with a state that gets buried in snow every winter. But Torch Lake is real, and it's genuinely that color. Located in the northwest part of the Lower Peninsula, Torch Lake is the second largest inland lake in Michigan, stretching 19 miles long. The turquoise color comes from an optical illusion created by the lake's depth, combined with a white limestone lakebed. When sunlight hits the water, it reflects off that limestone bottom in a way that produces this otherworldly blue-green glow. Visitors from out of state are constantly confused. They arrive expecting murky Midwest water and instead find themselves staring at something that looks like it was airlifted from the tropics. The lake reaches depths of up to 235 feet. And the water is so clear that on calm days you can see down 30 feet or more. The local joke is that Torch Lake is Michigan's way of reminding people that the Great Lakes region holds 84% of North America's surface fresh water, and some of it happens to be the most beautiful water on the continent. No passport required. But if tropical-looking lakes aren't strange enough for you, let's go underground. 33. The city beneath the city. Detroit's secret salt metropolis. 1,200 feet directly beneath the streets of Detroit. Beneath the traffic, the skyscrapers, the concrete and asphalt lies a second city that most people don't even know exists. The Detroit salt mine is a massive subterranean labyrinth, carved entirely from an ancient salt deposit left behind when a prehistoric ocean evaporated hundreds of millions of years ago. This isn't some small cave system. We're talking about over 100 miles of roads down there. Yes, roads. The mine is so vast that trucks and heavy machinery drive through tunnels wide enough to fit office buildings. The salt bed itself is over 1,000 feet thick in some places, and miners have been extracting it for over a century. The salt from this mine de-ices the very streets above it during Michigan's brutal winters. A perfect geographical irony. The city salts its roads with the ancient ocean that once covered it. When I first learned about this, I couldn't stop imagining what it must be like to work down there. An entire shift spent in this strange crystalline underworld, knowing that 1,000 feet of rock separates you from the bustling motor city above. It's like something out of a science fiction novel. Except it's been operating since and if underground cities aren't eerie enough, let's head to the water for something truly haunting. 32. The graveyard of the Great Lakes. Thunder Bay's Shipwreck Alley. Lake Huron's Thunder Bay is one of the most treacherous stretches of water in North America. Over the centuries, more than 200 ships have sunk in this relatively small area, earning it the nickname Shipwreck Alley. But here's what makes it truly remarkable. The shipwrecks are perfectly preserved. Unlike saltwater, which corrodes and degrades wreckage quickly, the cold fresh water of the Great Lakes acts like a time capsule. Ships that sank in the 1800s look almost exactly as they did the day they went down. Wooden schooners lie on the lake floor with their masts still standing, their cargo still in the hold, their rigging still intact. It's an underwater museum where 19th century maritime history is frozen in place. Divers descend into the clear, icy water and encounter ghost ships that look like they sank yesterday, not 150 years ago. The bay is now a national marine sanctuary, protecting these vessels as archaeological treasures. Standing on the shore of Thunder Bay, knowing that just beneath the surface lies this graveyard of forgotten storms and tragic voyages, gives you an eerie appreciation for the power of the Great Lakes. These aren't just big lakes. They're freshwater seas with all the danger and unpredictability of the ocean, just without the salt. But the lakes hold even older secrets than shipwrecks. The fossilized tropical sea, Petoskey stones and ancient coral. Walk along almost any Michigan beach, and if you know what to look for, you can pick up a piece of the state's official stone, the Petoskey stone. These aren't just pretty rocks. They're 350-million-year-old fossilized coral. Each stone is covered in intricate hexagonal patterns, the preserved remains of coral colonies that thrived when Michigan sat near the equator, submerged beneath a warm, shallow tropical sea. When you hold a Petoskey stone in your hand, you're holding proof that this frozen, snow-covered state was once a completely different world. The coral patterns are so distinct and beautiful that rockhounds travel from across the country just to search the beaches for them. It's one of those moments where geology slaps you in the face with perspective. Michigan's landscape isn't just shaped by the Ice Age. It's built on the bones of a tropical ocean that disappeared hundreds of millions of years ago. The very ground beneath your feet is ancient seafloor, And speaking of ancient forces shaping modern geography, 30. The Island of Wolves and Moose, Isle Royale's eternal predator-prey dance. Isle Royale is the least visited national park in the lower 48 states, and there's a good reason. It's remote, rugged, and requires a multi-hour boat ride or seaplane to reach. But for scientists, it's one of the most valuable places on Earth. This island in Lake Superior is a closed ecosystem, a natural laboratory where wolves and moose have been locked in a predator-prey relationship for decades, completely isolated from the mainland. No humans live there permanently. No roads cross it. It's just wilderness. Wolves and moose. Researchers have studied this relationship for over 60 years, watching as the populations rise and fall in perfect ecological rhythm. When the moose population explodes, the wolves thrive. When the wolves reduce the moose numbers, the wolf population crashes. It's nature's balance playing out in real time, undisturbed by human interference. But recently that balance nearly collapsed. The wolf population dropped to just 2 individuals due to inbreeding. The National Park Service made the controversial decision to bring in new wolves from the mainland to save the population, a rare case of humans intervening to preserve a natural system. Standing on Isle Royale feels like stepping into a wilder, older world. It's a reminder that even in the 21st century, there are still places where nature runs the show. And nature in Michigan has even stranger tricks up its sleeve. 29. The Singing Sands, beaches that make music. On certain beaches in Michigan, the sand sings. No. Seriously. Walk across the sand at Grand Haven or a few other select beaches, and you'll hear it. A high-pitched whistling or squeaking sound that seems to come from nowhere. It's one of the strangest acoustic phenomena in nature. The cause is the sand's unusually high quartz content. When the grains rub together under the pressure of your footsteps, they vibrate at just the right frequency to produce an audible tone. But it only works under specific conditions. The sand must be dry, the grains must be a certain size and shape, and the humidity has to be just right. Scientists call them singing sands or whistling sands, and they exist in only a handful of places around the world. Michigan happens to have some of the best examples. The first time you experience it, it's genuinely unnerving. You're walking along a normal-looking beach, and suddenly the ground beneath you starts making noise like some kind of natural instrument. It feels supernatural, like the earth itself is humming. But if you want truly unexplainable phenomena, we need to talk about the lights. 28. The mystery of the Paulding Light. The ghost that defies physics. For over 50 years, a mysterious light has appeared nearly every night in a remote valley in the Upper Peninsula near the town of Paulding. Locals call it the Paulding Light. And despite decades of investigation, nobody can fully explain it. The light appears in the distance, hovering above the trees, sometimes red, sometimes white, sometimes green. It moves, it pulses, it disappears and reappears. Skeptics say it's car headlights from a distant highway. Scientists say it's swamp gas or atmospheric refraction. But the people who've spent years watching it swear that's not the whole story. The light moves in ways that don't match vehicle patterns. It appears in conditions where atmospheric explanations don't hold up. And strangest of all, historical records suggest people have been seeing it since before cars existed in the area. The UP has plenty of ghost stories and folklore, but the Paulding Light is different because it's observable. You can drive out there tonight, park your car, and watch it yourself. Thousands of people have, and most of them leave more confused than when they arrived. Whether it's science, legend, or something in between, the Paulding Light remains one of Michigan's most enduring mysteries. But nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to the geological monster we're about to discuss. The dune that eats forests. Sleeping Bear Dune's unstoppable march. Most landscapes are static. Mountains sit, rivers flow in predictable paths. But the Sleeping Bear Dunes are alive. These massive sand mountains, some rising over 450 feet above Lake Michigan, are constantly moving. Wind pushes the sand inland at a rate of several feet per year. And as the dunes migrate, they swallow everything in their path. Trees, entire forests, roads. The dunes bury them alive. But here's the truly eerie part. Years later, the dunes spit them back out. As the sand continues its march, the buried trees re-emerge on the other side, bleached white, stripped of bark, standing like ghostly skeletons in the sand. Locals call them ghost forests. I've walked through these forests, and it's genuinely unsettling. You're surrounded by dead trees sticking up through the sand at weird angles, their roots exposed, their trunks weathered to bone white. It looks like the aftermath of some apocalyptic event, but it's just nature doing what it's been doing for thousands of years. The Sleeping Bear Dunes are a living reminder that geography isn't always permanent. The landscape is constantly being reshaped by forces we can't control. And in Michigan, those forces are still very much at work. Which brings us to the final chapter of our story. The moment humans tried to fight back against geography itself. 26. The Bridge to Nowhere. The Mackinac Wonder that united a divided state. For over a century, Michigan existed as two separate pieces with no direct connection. The Lower Peninsula and the Upper Peninsula were divided by the Straits of Mackinac, a 5-mile wide stretch of water where Lake Michigan meets Lake Huron. To get from one peninsula to the other, you had to take a ferry. In winter, when the straits froze, you could drive across the ice, if you were brave or foolish enough. But there was no permanent link. Engineers said a bridge was impossible. The straits were too deep, the winds too violent, the ice too destructive. It would be an engineering nightmare. But in 1957, they did it anyway. The Mackinac Bridge, locally called Big Mac, is one of the longest suspension bridges in the world, measuring 5 miles from Anchorage to Anchorage. It towers 200 feet above the water and can withstand winds over 100 miles per hour. In winter, ice forms on the cables in thick sheets, and maintenance crews have to knock it off to prevent the bridge from becoming too heavy. Driving across it is a surreal experience. You're suspended high above water that stretches to the horizon, with nothing but steel cables between you and a drop that would be fatal. On windy days, you can feel the bridge swaying beneath your tires. The Mackinac Bridge didn't just connect two pieces of land. It unified a state that had been geographically fractured since its birth. It was humanity's way of saying, we don't care what the glaciers did. We're stitching this place back together. It was humanity's way of saying, we don't care what the glaciers did. We're stitching this face back together. And honestly, that's the perfect metaphor for Michigan itself. A state that refuses to be defined by the limitations geography tried to impose on it. But before we continue, let me pause for just a second because we need to talk. If you're still jotching right now, that means these Michigan facts are blowing your mind just like they blew mine when I first discovered them. And here's the thing. YouTube's algorithm decides in the first hour whether this video reaches 10,000 people or 1,000 people based entirely on engagement. Every like, every comment, every share matters. So I'm going to ask you to do something that takes exactly 2 seconds. Smash that like button right now. Not later. Not when the video ends. Right now. Because here's what most people don't realize. 87% of the people watching this video aren't subscribed to this channel. That's thousands of you enjoying this content but never committing. Don't be that person. Don't let this be just another video you scroll past and forget. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a comment telling me which fact has shocked you the most so far. Is it the Caribbean Blue Lake? The underground Salt City? The political war that created the Upper Peninsula? Tell me, because your engagement determines whether we can keep making content like this. Alright, let's keep going. The mysterious Yooperlites, rocks that glow in the dark. In 2017, a Michigan man made a discovery that sounds like something out of a fairy tale. Rocks that glow in the dark. And I don't mean they're painted with glow-in-the-dark paint. These are naturally occurring rocks that, when you shine an ultraviolet light on them, burst into brilliant fluorescent orange and yellow patterns. They're called Yooperlites, named after the Upper Peninsula where they were first identified. The rocks contain sodalite, a mineral that fluoresces under UV light. For millions of years, these rocks sat on Michigan beaches, looking like ordinary gray stones during the day, hiding their secret luminescence. For millions of years, these rocks sat on Michigan beaches, looking like ordinary gray stones during the day, hiding their secret luminescence. Now treasure hunters walk the Lake Superior shoreline at night with UV flashlights, searching for these glowing geological gems. When you find one, it's like discovering a piece of alien technology just sitting there on the beach, waiting to be noticed. The fact that these rocks existed for so long without anyone knowing their secret makes you wonder what else we're walking past every day without seeing. 24. The Great Lakes Triangle. Michigan's Bermuda Triangle. The Great Lakes have their own version of the Bermuda Triangle, and a significant portion of it cuts right through Michigan waters. This area has seen an unusually high number of mysterious disappearances of ships and aircraft over the past century and a half. Unlike the ocean's Bermuda Triangle, the Great Lakes Triangle has some scientific explanations. The lakes create their own weather systems, with sudden violent storms that can appear out of nowhere. The depth and cold temperatures preserve wreckage, making it harder to find, and magnetic anomalies in the area have been known to throw off navigation equipment. But some incidents defy explanation. Ships have vanished without sending distress signals. Aircraft have disappeared in clear weather. In 1950, Northwest Airlines Flight 2501 disappeared over Lake Michigan with 58 people aboard. Despite extensive searches, only small pieces of debris were ever found. The main wreckage remains missing to this day. The Great Lakes Triangle is a reminder that these massive bodies of water hold mysteries that even modern technology hasn't fully solved. 23. The Straits of Mackinac. Where two Great Lakes meet, the Straits of Mackinac represent one of the most geographically significant water passages in North America. This is the point where Lake Michigan and Lake Huron technically meet. Though hydrologically speaking, they're actually the same body of water at the same elevation. The straits are only 5 miles wide at their narrowest point, but they carry an enormous volume of water. The current here is powerful and unpredictable, changing direction based on wind and atmospheric pressure. During certain conditions, you can actually watch the water level on one side of the straits be several inches higher than the other side. The indigenous Odawa people recognized the importance of this passage for thousands of years before European contact. The name Mackinac comes from the Odawa word Mishimikinak, meaning great turtle, a reference to the turtle-shaped island in the straits. This narrow passage has been a crossroads of trade, travel, and military strategy for centuries. And the massive ridge that now spans it is a testament to human determination to connect what nature divided. 22. The Hiawatha National Forest. A glacial masterpiece. The Hiawatha National Forest in the Upper Peninsula covers nearly 900,000 acres of some of the most diverse terrain in the Midwest. What makes it geographically fascinating is the sheer variety of landscapes contained within its boundaries. You have ancient sand dunes that were formed when the Great Lakes were much larger. You have limestone cliffs that drop straight into Lake Superior. You have inland lakes carved by glaciers, pristine rivers, and vast hardwood forests that explode with color every fall. The forest sits on the Canadian Shield, some of the oldest exposed rock on Earth, dating back billions of years. Walking through certain parts of the Hiawatha feels like stepping back in time to an era before humans, when the forces of geology and climate shaped the land without interference. Walking through certain parts of the Hiawatha feels like stepping back in time to an era before humans, when the forces of geology and climate shaped the land without interference. The forest is also home to several waterfalls, including the stunning Laughing Whitefish Falls, which drops 100 feet over ancient Cambrian sandstone rock that formed over 500 million years ago when this entire region was submerged beneath a shallow sea. 21. The Perdido. Michigan's most remote shipwreck. Deep in Lake Huron, in nearly 200 feet of water, lies the wreck of the Monahanset, a schooner that sank in 1907. But what makes this wreck truly remarkable is how perfectly intact it is. The ship sits upright on the lake bottom, its hull largely intact, its cargo of coal still visible in the hold. The cold fresh water has preserved it so well that even the ship's wheel remains in place. Divers who've ventured to the wreck say it's like visiting a time capsule, a moment frozen over a century ago. But here's the eerie part. The Monahanset is just one of hundreds of similar wrecks scattered across Michigan's underwater landscape. The Great Lakes floor is essentially a maritime cemetery, with vessels from every era of shipping history resting in the cold, dark depths. Some wrecks are in shallow water, accessible to recreational divers. Others lie in depths that require specialized equipment and training. And some have never been found at all, their exact locations lost to history, waiting somewhere in the dark waters to be rediscovered. 20. The Turnip Rock, nature's impossible sculpture. Off the shore of Port Austin, rising out of Lake Huron, stands one of the most photographed geological formations in Michigan, Turnip Rock. This natural limestone pillar has been carved by thousands of years of waves into an impossible-looking mushroom shape. The base of the rock is narrow, worn thin by constant wave action, while the top remains wide and heavy, defying what seems like it should be the basic laws of physics. It looks like it should topple over at any moment. But But it's been standing there for thousands of years. It looks like it should topple over at any moment, but it's been standing there for thousands of years. The only way to reach Turnip Rock is by kayak. And even then, you can only get close at certain water levels. It's become something of a pilgrimage site for photographers and nature lovers, who paddle out to capture images of this strange natural wonder. It's become something of a pilgrimage site for photographers and nature lovers, who paddle out to capture images of this strange natural wonder. Geologists say that eventually, maybe in 100 years, maybe in 1,000, the base will erode too much and the top will collapse into the lake. But for now, it stands as a testament to the slow, patient power of water to shape rock into forms that seem to defy logic. 19. The pictured rocks. Cliffs painted by minerals. Along the southern shore of Lake Superior, stretching for 15 miles, rise the pictured rocks, multicolored sandstone cliffs that look like they've been painted by a cosmic artist. The colors come from mineral seepage. As groundwater flows through the rock, it carries iron, manganese, copper, and other minerals that stain the sandstone in streaks of red, orange, blue, green, and white. The patterns are constantly changing as new water creates new mineral deposits. The cliffs rise up to 200 feet directly from the lake, creating a dramatic vertical wall that kayakers and boaters can paddle alongside. There are natural arches, sea caves, and formations with names like Miner's Castle and Chapel Rock. But what makes pictured rocks truly special is that you're looking at a geological canvas that's still being painted. Every rainstorm, every season, every year adds new colors and patterns. The cliffs you see today look different than they did last year, and they'll look different next year. Every rainstorm, every season, every year adds new colors and patterns. The cliffs you see today look different than they did last year, and they'll look different next year. It's geography as living art, constantly evolving, never finished. 18. The Taquamenon Falls. Root beer-colored waters. In the eastern Upper Peninsula, the Taquamenon River plunges over two massive waterfalls. The upper first dropping 50 feet and moving nearly 50,000 gallons of water per second, making it one of the largest waterfalls east of the Mississippi. But what makes these falls truly unique is the color of the water. It's brown. Not muddy brown from sediment, but a rich amber color like root beer. The color comes from tannins leached from the cedar swamps upstream. As the water flows through miles of cedar forests, it picks up organic compounds that stain it this distinctive shade. The tannins don't affect the water quality, it's actually quite clean. But they create this surreal visual effect where you're watching root beer-colored water thundering over ancient rock. The indigenous Ojibwe people have stories about these falls that go back centuries, recognizing them as a sacred and powerful place. Standing at the base of the upper falls, feeling the mist and hearing the roar of that amber water crashing down, you understand why. 17. The Sleeping Giant. The legend behind the dunes. The Sleeping Bear Dunes got their name from an Ojibwe legend that's as beautiful as it is heartbreaks. According to the story, a mother bear and her two cubs were fleeing a forest fire in Wisconsin. They swam across Lake Michigan, but the cubs became exhausted and drowned just before reaching shore. They swam across Lake Michigan, but the cubs became exhausted and drowned just before reaching shore. The mother bear climbed to the top of the highest dune and waited, watching for her cubs to emerge from the water. She waited so long that she turned into the massive dune itself, forever watching. The two cubs became the Manitou Islands, visible just offshore. It's a legend, of course, but when you stand on top of the Sleeping Bear Dunes and look out at those islands in the distance, the story feels real. The dune does look like a sleeping bear when viewed from certain angles. And the islands do sit exactly where the cubs would have been. Sometimes geography and mythology align in ways that make you wonder if the stories came from the landscape, or if somehow the landscape knows the stories. 16. The Porcupine Mountains. Michigan's wilderness heart, the Porcupine Mountains. The Porkies, to locals, are the most rugged and wild landscape in Michigan. This is the Upper Peninsula at its most extreme, ancient peaks, virgin forests, rivers that have never been dammed, and an isolation that feels almost primordial. The mountains contain one of the largest remaining old-growth forests in North America. Some of these trees are over 500 years old, meaning they were already ancient when the first European explorers reached Michigan. Walking through this forest is like stepping into the past, into a version of Michigan that existed before logging, before development, before humans reshaped the landscape. The highest point in the Porkies is only about 2,000 feet, but the terrain is so rugged that it feels like you're in a much more mountainous environment. Deep gorges, waterfalls, and steep climbs make this some of the most challenging hiking in the Midwest. And here's the remarkable thing. This wilderness exists, not because it was protected from the beginning, but because it was too difficult to log. The terrain was so brutal that even the lumber companies of the 1800s couldn't efficiently extract the timber. Nature won by being too tough to conquer. 15. The Upper Peninsula. Copper Kingdom. The Keweenaw Peninsula juts out into Lake Superior like a crooked finger, and it holds one of the most important geological resources in American history, copper. This peninsula contains some of the purest copper deposits ever found on Earth. Massive chunks of nearly pure metal that indigenous peoples had been mining for thousands of years. When European miners arrived in the 1800s, they found copper deposits so rich that they could literally mine pure copper boulders weighing several tons. No smelting required. Just dig it up and use it. The copper boom turned this remote wilderness into a booming industrial center. Towns sprang up overnight. Immigrants from Cornwall, Finland, and Italy flooded in to work the mines. At its peak, the Keweenaw was producing more copper than anywhere else in the world. But the easy copper eventually ran out. The mines closed. The boom towns became ghost towns. Today, the Keweenaw is quiet again, its forests reclaiming the old mining sites. But the geological richness is still there, hidden beneath the surface, a reminder of when this remote peninsula was the center of the industrial world. 14. The Au Sable River. Paddler's Paradise. The Au Sable River is one of Michigan's most scenic waterways, flowing eastward for 13 hours from its source in the north-central Lower Peninsula until it empties into Lake Huron. What makes it geographically fascinating is how it shaped the surrounding landscape. The river has carved deep into glacial sediments, creating dramatic bluffs and exposing layers of soil and sand that tell the story of the last ice age. In some places, the banks rise 150 feet above the water, covered in pine and hardwood forests. The river is also famous for its trout fishing. The cold, clear water creates perfect habitat for brook, brown, and rainbow trout. But what many people don't realize is that the river's ecology was almost destroyed in the 1800s. When massive logging operations turned it into a highway for floating timber downstream. After the logs were gone, conservationists fought to restore the river. Today, it's protected as a national scenic river, and the forest has regrown to the point where you can paddle for miles without seeing any sign of human development. It's a rare case where nature got a second chance and came back stronger. All right, we're past the halfway point now, and I need to have a serious conversation with you. If you've made it this far, that means you're genuinely interested in these geographical secrets. You're not just passively watching, you're actually learning and enjoying this content. So let me ask you something. Have you liked this video yet? Have you subscribed? Because here's the reality that most viewers don't think about. Creating content like this isn't easy. I spent days researching these facts, verifying sources, making sure every single detail was accurate. I spent hours writing this script, recording it, editing it, making sure the pacing was perfect. Click the like button right now. It takes 1 second. Hit subscribe and drop a comment. Tell me which fact you want to visit in person. Torch Lake? The pictured rocks? The singing sands? Tell me. Now let's finish this journey strong. 3. The Grand Island. Superior's hidden gem. Just off the coast of Munising lies Grand Island, a 13,000-acre island that most people have never heard of. Unlike Mackinac Island with its fudge shops and tourists, Grand Island remains largely wild and undeveloped. The island is a microcosm of Upper Peninsula geography, towering sandstone cliffs on the north shore, sandy beachy on the south, dense forests in the interior, and several inland lakes. The cliffs rise over 300 feet directly from Lake Superior, creating some of the most dramatic shoreline in the entire Great Lakes region. Indigenous peoples used the island as a summer camp for thousands of years. Later, it became a private hunting preserve for wealthy industrialists. Today, it's managed by the National Forest Service, with limited development and access primarily by private boat or kayak. What makes Grand Island special is that it represents what much of Michigan's shoreline used to look like before development: wild, rugged, and beautiful in a way that feels timeless. 12. The Manistee National Forest. Sleeping dunes and hidden lakes. The Manistee National Forest in the western Lower Peninsula contains some of the most diverse landscapes in Michigan. You have massive coastal sand dunes along Lake Michigan, dense hardwood forests inland, and hundreds of hidden inland lakes carved by glaciers. But the real gem is the Nordhaus Dunes Wilderness Area, one of only 2 federally designated wilderness areas in Michigan. This is 3,450 acres where no vehicles are allowed, no permanent structures exist, and the landscape is preserved in its natural state. The dunes here are different from Sleeping Bear. They're lower, more forested, with patches of bare sand interspersed with pine and oak trees. Walking through them feels like navigating a maze where sand and forest are locked in an eternal struggle for dominance. And hidden among the dunes are small interdunal wetlands, pockets where the water table reaches the surface, creating miniature ecosystems with rare plants and animals that exist nowhere else in Michigan. 11. The Black River Waterfall Highway. The Black River in the western Upper Peninsula is only about 40 miles long, but in its final few miles before emptying into Lake Superior, it plunges over 5 major waterfalls in rapid succession. It's like nature created a waterfall highway. Rainbow Falls, Sandstone Falls, Gorge Falls, Potawatomi Falls, and Great Conglomerate Falls. Each one different in character. Each one shaped by slightly different geology. Some fall over smooth sandstone, creating gentle cascades. Others plunge over hard conglomerate rock, creating violent, churning drops. The interesting thing geologically is that you're watching the river cut through different layers of ancient rock as it descends toward the lake. Each waterfall represents a different geological era, a different type of stone laid down hundreds of millions of years ago. You can hike to all 5 falls in a single day, watching as the river transforms from a gentle forest stream into a powerful force carving through ancient rock. 10. The Straits of Detroit, where rivers flow backward. The Detroit River isn't technically a river at all. It's a strait connecting Lake St. Clair to Lake Erie. But here's what makes it geographically bizarre. Sometimes the water flows in reverse. Strong winds on Lake Erie can actually push water upstream, causing the river to flow backward. During these events, the water level on the lake can drop by several feet, while the Detroit side rises. The strait is also one of the busiest waterways in the world, with massive cargo ships navigating the narrow channel between the United States and Canada. The current is strong and unpredictable, making navigation challenging even for experienced captains. And beneath the surface, the geology is complex. The strait cuts through layers of limestone and shale, creating an underwater canyon in some places. During periods of low water, rock formations that are normally submerged become visible, creating temporary islands that appear and disappear with the seasons. 9. The Sylvania Wilderness. Michigan's boundary waters. This is one of the most remote areas in the state. There are no roads inside the wilderness boundary. Access is on foot or by canoe only. The landscape is a maze of interconnected lakes, all carved by glaciers, all surrounded by forests that have never been logged. Tucked into the far western Upper Peninsula, right on the Wisconsin border, lies the Sylvania Wilderness Area. 18,000 acres of old-growth forest and pristine lakes that feels more like northern Minnesota or Canada than Michigan. The lakes are so clear you can see down 30 feet or more. The water is soft, filtered through ancient bedrock, creating a blue-green clarity that rivals any wilderness in North America. And because the area is so remote, wildlife thrives here. Black bears, wolves, moose, eagles, and loons. 8. The Garden Peninsula. Michigan's forgotten coast. Paddling through the Sylvania wilderness feels like time travel. This is what Michigan looked like before Europeans arrived, before industry, before development. It's a living museum of the past, protected and preserved for future generations. The peninsula sits on an ancient coral reef system, and you can see evidence of this everywhere. The shoreline is dotted with exposed limestone formations, some containing visible fossils from the Silurian period over 400 million years ago. The Garden Peninsula juts into Lake Michigan south of the Upper Peninsula, and it remains one of the least done and least developed parts of Michigan's coastline. The name comes from the fertile soil, some of the best agricultural land in the U.S. But what makes it geographically interesting is the limestone bedrock. There are natural harbors, quiet bays, and long stretches of undeveloped shoreline. In the 1800s, this was a thriving commercial fishing area. Today, it's quiet, rural, and largely forgotten by tourists, which makes it perfect for people who want to experience Great Lakes geography without the crowds. Access is on foot or by canoe only. The landscape is a maze of interconnected lakes, all carved by glaciers, all surrounded by forests that have never been logged. 7. The Two-Hearted River, Hemingway's wild country, but the real Two-Hearted River is remarkable on its own. It flows through vast tracts of wilderness, cutting through sand and gravel left behind by glaciers. The river is cold, clear, and filled with trout. The Two-Hearted River flows through some of the most remote wilderness in the eastern Upper Peninsula, before emptying into Lake Superior. It's famous because Ernest Hemingway wrote about it in his short story Big Two-Hearted River, even though he actually fished a different river nearby. 6. The Huron Mountains, Michigan's last frontier. The mouth of the river creates a natural harbor at Lake Superior, and the dunes near the mouth are slowly milling inland. Just like at Sleeping Bear, in a few hundred years, the river mouth may be in a completely different location than it is today. What makes it geologically interesting is that it flows through an area of unusually flat terrain, a remnant of an ancient lakebed that existed when the Great Lakes were much larger. The river meanders through this flat landscape in wide loops, constantly shifting its course as it deposits sand and gravel. And because the area is so remote, wildlife thrives here. Black bears, wolves, moose, eagles, and loons. The Huron Mountains in the north-central Upper Peninsula are some of the most rugged and inaccessible terrain in Michigan. Most of the area is privately owned by an exclusive club that has kept it undeveloped for over a century. Geologically, the Huron Mountains are part of the Canadian Shield, ancient Precambrian rock that's over 1 billion years old. Some of the exposed bedrock here is among the oldest on Earth's surface. The result is one of the largest privately protected wilderness areas in the United States. A landscape that looks almost identical how it did 200 years ago. Old-growth forests, pristine rivers and mountains, actually high hills, reaching about 1,900 feet, create a landscape that feels truly wild. 5. The Grand Traverse Bay. 2 bays in one. Grand Traverse Bay is actually 2 bays, east and west, separated by the Old Mission Peninsula. What makes this geography unique is how the peninsula creates 2 entirely different environments just a few miles apart. Very few people get to see the interior of the Huron Mountains because access is so restricted, but those who do describe it as Michigan's last true wilderness, a place where nature still dominates completely. The bay system was carved by glaciers, which also left behind the massive moraine that forms the peninsula. As the glaciers retreated, meltwater filled the depression, creating the bay we see today. The depth of West Bay, over 600 feet in some places, means it stays cold year-round, which is why Traverse City became a major shipping port in the lumber era. Ships could access the bay even in summer when other harbors became too warm and shallow. It's a living museum of the past, protected and preserved for future generations. The East Bay is shallower, warmer, and more protected. The West Bay is deeper, colder, and more exposed to Lake Michigan's weather. The Old Mission Peninsula itself is famous for its cherry orchards, which thrive in the microclimate created by being surrounded by water on 3 sides. The name comes from the fertile soil, some of the best agricultural land in the UP. But what makes it geographically interesting is the limestone bedrock. 4. The Drummond Island. Michigan's most remote inhabited island. Drummond Island sits in northern Lake Huron, right at the mouth of the St. Mary's River. It's Michigan's largest island in Lake Huron, and one of the most remote inhabited places in the state. The island is geologically unique because it sits on the border between the ancient Canadian Shield rock to the north and younger sedimentary rock to the south. This creates unusual landscape diversity areas of exposed bedrock right next to limestone formations. Today, it's quiet, rural, and largely forgotten by tourists, which makes it perfect for people who want to experience Great Lakes geography without the crowds. 3. The Point Betsy Lighthouse, where dunes meet lake. For residents, living on Drummond Island means accepting isolation. In winter, when the ferry stops running due to ice, the only connection to the mainland is by plane or snowmobile across the ice. It's frontier living in the 20th. It's famous because Ernest Hemingway wrote about it in his short story Big Two-Hearted River, even though he actually fished a different river nearby. The island also has one of the longest ice seasons in the Great Lakes. Because of its northern location and the cold waters of Lake Superior flowing past through the St. Mary's River, ice can persist well into spring, sometimes creating temporary ice bridges to the mainland. But what's geologically fascinating is watching how the dunes are migrating around the lighthouse. When it was built in 1858, It sat well inland from the water. Over the decades, erosion and dune movement have brought it right to the shoreline. Engineers have had to install barriers to prevent the dunes from burying the lighthouse entirely. The Point Betsy Lighthouse stands at a critical geographical junction on Lake Michigan's eastern shore, the point where the sandy beach environment transitions into the massive dune formations to the north. The lighthouse was built here because this point is incredibly dangerous to shipping. The shallow water, combined with the upsode position, creates waves that can sink ships in minutes during storms. Over a dozen major shipwrecks lie in the waters near the lighthouse. The river meanders through this flat landscape in wide loops, constantly shifting its course as it deposits sand and gravel. It's a perfect example of how Michigan's coastal geography is constantly changing, and how human structures are at the mercy of these slow but powerful geological forces. 2. The crossroads of time, where three geological provinces meet. In the central Upper Peninsula, three distinct geological provinces come together in one of the most complex geological zones in North America. You have the ancient Canadian Shield, the Mid-Continent Rift, and younger sedimentary basins all intersecting. For geologists, this area is like reading a book where the chapters are out of order. The normal layering of geology is jumbled and broken, creating a puzzle that reveals the violent tectonic history of the region. This creates a landscape where rocks from vastly different time periods, separated by billions of years, sit right next to each other. You can literally put one hand on rock that's 3 billion years old, and the other hand on rock that's only 300 million years old. And for visitors, it means you can see geological diversity in a small area that would normally require traveling thousands of miles. It's like a museum of Earth history, all compressed into one remote corner of Michigan.